like that. So like, you'll trust me, this will be one of the funnier exercises of today. So I need to be. I'm at the next level. It's like, how do I make a SQL queries match with my routes? Like, that was where I was like, ah.
What was the other thing that somebody asked for? It was callbacks and
I know it was like 3 people on callbacks.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, callbacks was definitely a
Do you remember that? What was the other thing that they callbacks people were asking for?
Okay, well, if the other person comes and asks, then we will do it. And if not, was it Miles? Okay. Okay.
Oh, so for the callbacks, okay.
Yeah, no, yeah. What do you got?
I want to know why would I use in callbacks and using them instead of a promise? Like because like I understand we're going to end up using promises a lot, but then there are those times, which I don't know when, you would use a callback instead of a promise. So that was one of those. Okay, well, when would that be? So that was one of the things I wanted. I wanted to know more about callbacks and why we use them instead of a promise.
Okay.
Because everything up is promises, but I'm like, there's that one caveat that I kind of want to know.
Okay. Miles, did you have another question?
No, it's office hours type question.
Yeah.
But, order of development.
I was going to say, what development? That's what I felt like. Order development.
Yeah.
You're trying to see if you're learning everything to get the big picture type of thing.
Like when you start, when you assign a benchmark, if we're doing test-driven development, defensive development, all the keywords, what would be the process you do to do that? And I got a little sheet from, I guess, when you created stuff, but yeah, and that's something that's like easy to talk about. Then by all means,
Okay. Okay. There was another topic that okay. I'm thinking of something else, but that's okay. All right. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about callbacks. So I mean, first of all, callbacks predated promises, right? And so promises in general, if you have an option to use promises versus callbacks, you're going to want to use promises. So if you're writing your own code and you want to implement something asynchronous, make sure that your function returns a promise that you create rather than using a callback. In general, promises are cleaner than callbacks. They make when you're calling the function, they make that calling the function look cleaner. You can use that one catch for a bunch of .change.thens rather than having to deal with the error every time. Promises are more modern than callbacks. You are mostly going to be using callbacks for functions that don't have promises implemented. That's mostly when you're going to be using callbacks. So for example, you're going to be using callbacks when you're using other people's functions and promises aren't implemented. Yeah, so you look at, not sure what that was. You just look at the documentation. So if I am going to like this file system, I look here and I can see, okay, if I am going to be using this FSF stat and I want to use it synchronously, then I don't need a callback, but asynchronously, I need a callback. That's the way it has been written. The FS library at this point does not support promises. So you're going to be using callbacks. Yeah, for reading and writing files. Yeah, Jedi.
Is it safe to assume that that functions with that take anything with that signature that promise like fulfill or reject? Is it safe to assume that those probably are implementing a promise in that case, or?
Yeah, let's look and see in documentation. For example, let's look at PG Promise and see what let's look at the documentation and see. Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, so it just has usage, query names. All right, so here this is not telling me what I want. There was something back here about the API. Oh no, this was just when you create your new promise. I've had problems with this documentation before. I don't know why I went straight there. Let's see. PG Promise documentation. Let's see what I get. Yeah, so what I really want is to see like an official documentation of the db.any, like an official like sort of function, call. But here you can tell that it's a promise because you have the .then, right? That's basically how you know it's a promise. Yeah, and that's the best I have for you here. What else uses promises? Let's see, HTTP. Oh yeah, fetch. Okay, let's do. Oh, HTTP. Okay, well then we definitely want. See, and even just like instinctively when I heard that, I'm like, oh, well then I want to use fetch. I don't want to use the one with callbacks. Yeah. So I mean, again, I probably. What did you say, Mouse? Fetches life. So again, I probably would look at this and just assume that it was a promise, because yeah, so Miles prefers fetch because there's a lot less overhead than using HTTP, which means that it's more abstracted. You're getting like farther away and you have less control. But if yeah, but if you actually want to control the stream of data, right, then you're going to want to use something lower level. But if you don't care about that, then okay, yeah, so let's isomorphic fetch. Yeah. So I'm just looking to see, but basically, yeah, here we go. So now it's telling you that fetch returns a promise. It takes a URL, it takes options, and it returns a promise. And anything that returns a promise, you're going to be able to put a .then on. And what does that .then return? It returns a promise, which is why you can chain the .thens.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Did that answer your question, Jedi?
So you kind of answered my question too. So there are certain times, like with HTTP, you're going to use a callback, not a promise. And so I guess it's like you're saying basically documentation.
Yeah, it's based on how it was implemented, right? And so we know that for file system, we have to give it a callback. File system is not implemented with promises. Whereas fetch, if we see that, yes, this returns a promise.
Then that's, thank you. That's straightforward.
Okay. Yes, and then the other thing that we learned, which I knew already, is that the PG promise documentation is just terrible. It's like, why can't I just get something like this for .all, right? Why? Anyway, okay. So, are we ready to move on, or do you want to talk more about callbacks?
Now that I understand, like, where I will not be using it.
The other people who were asking about callbacks, do you have further questions? I don't know. Take that as a no. Okay. All right. So order of development. Yeah. So I heard what you were saying this morning, Miles, about, just like writing a lot of code, and then you kind of had a mess of code and, and no tests and whatever. So so first I'm going to look up defensive code. Oh, Googling. Stephanie wanted to talk about Googling. Okay.
That was it.
Yeah.
It was like, we gotta look up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So,
No, that was a good question.
Yeah.
That's something major for our job. And I'm not gonna lie, right.
Yeah.
I bookmark everything. That's why I book. Well, I was asking about.
Okay. So I wanted to, so you mentioned defensive programming, and I have a sort of a vague concept in my head of what defensive programming is, but if I'm sitting here up front, I want to be nice and official. So I'm going to look up defensive programming. XKCD. Let's see. The best thesis defense is a good thesis offense. Okay. Okay. Defensive design intended to ensure the continuing function of a piece of software under unforeseen circumstances. Yeah. And so I know, so high availability, you don't want your program to go down. Safety, you want to make sure that you don't allow, I'm not sure what the difference between safety and security is, frankly, but
Sure no one can get in. Security. Safety is making sure that it's
Silo.
Right.
Doesn't mess up other stuff around it.
Right.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Okay. Right. So security is making sure no one can get in, and then safety is, I'm just repeating for the recording, safety is making sure that inside nothing is messing each other up.
Yeah, think of it as home is sound.
Home is sound. Okay, cool. Right. And so basically what defensive programming, unforeseen circumstances, just making sure in general you want to design your software so that only the proper code paths get run, right? But you might want to defend against somebody getting to this function in a way that you didn't anticipate, right? As you're writing the software that you would never want to get to this function if this particular parameter was blank, but you are defending against that possibility by inside the function making sure that if that parameter is blank, that you know, abort or whatever, or throw, yeah, or whatever you want to do.
So it's like safeguarding your program.
Yeah, it's basically or you know, or you could say safeguarding your programming, or just making sure that regardless of your best plans, you know, if somehow your plans go awry, that your program won't fall over, right? Yeah. And there are debates about it. I am in favor of defensive programming because I think that it is protecting your user from any mistakes that you might make. Whereas I know that at a company that I worked at, the lead engineer was very much against defensive programming. He thought that it was extra lines of code that needed to be maintained, and if you wrote your code well in the first place, it shouldn't be necessary. Different opinions. As an engineer, you are entitled to your own opinion, and you are entitled to change it frequently. So back to Stephanie's question about Googling. So I trusted that Google, when it gave me something, that it was true, but I did glance that it came from Wikipedia. I tend to trust Wikipedia on programming topics. I think Wikipedia is pretty good on programming topics. Yeah, so, and defense, I mean, it wasn't too unclear what I wanted to Google there. So Stephanie, I'm going to continue answering Miles's question. It just came up, and then after we'll talk about Googling. Yeah. So, but as far as order of development, so if you're going to have to decide, and it's quite possible on the job you won't decide. The job will decide for you how you do it, right? Whether you are going to do TDD, whether you're going to write your tests first and then your functions, or whether you are going to write your functions first and then your tests. Either way, I would recommend. So you probably, when you're writing your code, you probably like write some code and then you run your program to test it, right? I would recommend trying to get out of that habit. I would recommend writing your code, you know, if you're not doing TDD, writing your code and then writing tests to test it. And then later run your program and make sure it's doing what you think it's going to do. But you are kind of doubling your work by like testing it manually and then writing tests later, right? So, okay, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So the order of development. So I'm going to tell you what I would do. The first thing I would do is I would read the specs end to end, right? Make sure that I understand them, ask questions if necessary. Then I would think about architecture. So I would think about what functions are going to go in what files.
Bonnie, can you share screen? 5 off camera.
Oh, yes. Thank you for asking. Well, this is going to be a bummer of a recording. You're just going to be listening to me. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So, okay. So what functions are going to, so actually, let's try that. Let's do this a little bit differently. What files will I need, right? what functions do I need? And you might do those in the opposite order. Think about what functions you need, what files you need. And all the time that you're thinking about architecture, you're going to think about making it easy to test, right? What kind of architecture is going to make this easiest to test? So what files, what functions, functions used by multiple files, right? So you might have a function that it just like is writing data to a file, reading data from a file. Maybe those will go in some sort of helper file, or you can just call it, you know, what file IO or whatever. And, you know, so just thinking about just in general, how you're going to modularize for code reusability, for the least repetition. But at this point, I will definitely start building files and possibly even stubbing out functions, you know, just making the functions and, you know, putting maybe some comments in them. Python has this amazing thing. Where's my Python buddy, Theo? Python has this amazing thing called docstrings where like every function needs to have a docstring, and it actually can make, you can do automated documentation for your software using these docstrings. JavaScript has something called JSDoc, which I'm trying to get into the habit of using. Create files and functions, use JSDoc to create function signatures. And by function signatures, what's that? Oh, you use JSDoc? That's awesome. Yeah. So by function signatures, I mean, what are the parameters? What are the data types of the parameters? What is it going to return? So create and function stubs, right? Not actually writing the functions, right? And then here, now it's going to be if TDD, then write tests, right? Or otherwise write functions. But do it one at a time.
Yeah, I would love to get into where it's like a free code camp. You just have this list of tests and you're like, complete this algorithm, like basically solve this function. All the tests are passing, cool. I'll solve this function. It's going to go down the list.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it seems like test-driven development is trying to get you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, Stephanie.
Function signatures.
Oh yeah, so a function signature is what its parameters are, what the data type of its parameters are, and what it returns, what data type it returns. So you can use JSDoc. JSDoc is this. All right, this is not a hard one, but what would you Google here, Stephanie?
JSDoc.
Oh my God, you're brilliant. Okay. So, and here I might actually, instead of this index, I might actually go to the getting started, just because I might be more interested in an example than reading about, you know, everything. But basically, so here, these are constructors, which is more object-oriented stuff. But so a param, it's a string, you give the param a name, and then you give it a description. This hyphen is important because at some point you can run JSDoc on your file and it'll make you HTML that beautifully documents all of your functions. I know.
Why?
What if you were making an API that other people are going to use? This part keeps you honest. This is the part that I like more than the automated documentation. It keeps you honest. And if you can put JS doc stuff in your ESLint, and if you're in your ESLint RC, and if this stuff doesn't match your actual function, ESLint will yell at you, right? And it's nice. It helps you be very deliberate in your programming, right? If you write this before writing the function, it makes you think about it before just trying to throw something together.
So like I could just pass in all my functions and it'll create HTML.
Let's actually do a demo of this JS doc. So let's
Jedi has like a whole presentation.
oh, Jedi has a whole presentation on JS doc. Yeah.
We've been talking about it. It's a thing.
Cool. Okay, so I'll let you, but basically as long as you have, and Python does this too, except it does it with a more built-in type thing, but as long as you have your JS doc in the right format, you can run the JS doc command and it'll generate just really nicely formatted documentation for all of your functions. Yeah, which is good if other people are going to be using your functions. Okay, so back here, yeah, so write tests, write functions, yeah, and then I would say, so you write your tests and write your functions, and then test it. Okay, and then obviously you want your tests to be comprehensive. Right, you want your test to test everything you would test yourself if you were running the program and being like, I wonder what would happen if I left this out, you know, what my program would do. Try and get your tests to test that for you. And the thing is, if you do that, then your tests become your little robots and you don't need to keep doing it. It'll just keep building and doing it for you every time. But you definitely also want to test the running of the program just to make sure your tests, you know, are reflecting reality. Yeah. In general, you're going to have more test code than you have like actual code if your tests are comprehensive.
So the amount of time it saves, that each should be off, like have to retype in a form each time.
Oh yeah, no,
Situations. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, and sometimes, yeah, this is the go slow to go fast, but I totally know how it is, right? I mean, for my lectures, I have been wanting to use reveal.js for my lectures, but I feel like I don't have time to put that reveal.js system in place. So right now I'm just using Google Docs, and eventually I'll do reveal.js, right? Whereas if I felt like I had the space, it would just be so much faster. If I just did all that reveal.js and then writing my lectures, it would be so much faster in the future. Yeah, so. Yeah. 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 So I'm trying to think whether there's like any sort of wrap up stuff that you do at the end. Well, yes, definitely as part of writing your tests, you should make sure that you can get your tests not to pass. Yeah.
Or what is it? Make sure there are valid and invalid.
Tests for valid and invalid
Information.
Right. Also,
But hold on, let's Stephanie first, and
I
then.
was going to say also make sure you understand what message you're calling and what the return value is and what you're using, because like the date object that's built in, it automatically assigns a number to a letter. So if I was trying to be like, okay, if someone puts a string in, I'm going to say that's invalid. But there's like specific things you just can't, like you can't even run a test for, because it's like that actually you can't undo what it does. Or if something says, okay, I'm going to give it a number. So that was like, I was like in test circle hell. Like, how do I test an invalid input? Like, right. I want to catch all the edge cases, and you just have to sometimes let go of the edge cases and it's like a broken object that you're working with.
Thank you. Voice of experience.
Well, there's like they've already built in a way to catch the edge cases, and they handle it themselves by giving it a number. I couldn't tell it to do something different because it already built it.
Jedi, what were you going to ask?
I was in the notes of on the note of having tests fail when they should. Are those things that you would remove?
Yeah, right. So this is sort of like just do once and then undo, right? You know, but just to make sure that asynchronicity isn't giving you false positives. Yeah.
You wouldn't leave.
I was thinking of that as like you're supposed to perform the test and make sure it fails.
Yeah, that's the red-green testing. If you're just doing TDD, right, then you would make sure that you got a failing test first, and then which is a nice advantage of TDD. You don't have to break your tests after. You just write your test in the beginning, and it should fail. Yeah. Yeah, and then I would say the whole time I'm programming, I am rethinking architecture, right? Maybe I made some bad decisions in step 2, right? And as I'm writing the code, you know, reorganize to dry, right? Don't repeat yourself, and have efficient code, right? So that's something that just while I'm writing it, I'm just like, oh, you know what? Actually, what I thought was going to work when I was just sort of mapping it out actually really isn't going to work, or it might work, but it's not going to be ideal. And that's where you've got to be like, okay, part of programming is learning. I just learned that that's not a good way to do it, and I'm going to go back. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Learn something else.
All right. Cool. All right. Should we move on, or are we?
I'm sorry, dry.
Don't repeat yourself.
Yes. Acronym is dry and ABC.
What's ABC?
Always code.
All right. Nice. Or already been chewed, you know, for the gum elementary school set. Okay. Oh, keep it simple, sweetheart. Yeah. Yeah. We actually, at the place that I used to work, yeah, at the place I used to work, we somebody put that, we used to have just all these Post-its in the bathroom that would and so somebody said, yeah, keep it simple, stupid, and then we just all started being like, yeah, keep it simple, sweetie, keep it simple, software engineer, keep it simple, you know. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's right. The vandalism is very tame. Okay, let's talk about Googling. So think about something we want to learn more about or learn how to do. Somebody have something? Yeah, Jedi?
Here's one that's been kind of actually really hard.
Okay.
Integration testing without super test, but with Mocha and Chai.
Okay. All right. So so what would you start out with?
I would do test integration plus Mocha minus super test.
Okay. It's used for unit and integration testing. So part 2 is scanning these. I would say that this probably is going to reference super tests somewhere. So I'm just gonna say where we repeat sets of integration tests. Oops. I have to say that I don't know that I'm gonna modify this. Yeah.
Plus and the minus.
Oh, the plus means it must have Mocha, and the minus means it must not have super test.
See, that's a Googling skill right there.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually going to, looking at this, I actually think that none of these are addressing our issue that we don't want super test. And I actually think that I am going to say, and I tend to be a little bit more English-like, and I actually don't use plus and minus a lot. So I would probably say Mocha integration test without super test. I don't know that this is going to be helpful, but I'm going to try it. Super test.
Maybe put the houses on super close together. So
Yeah. No results. Okay, interesting. Yeah, no. So yeah, so the quotes are definitely good. So you were thinking not.
Mm-hmm.
Is the not different from the minus? Do I do all caps like this?
Yeah. I know. No, it's still showing.
the quotes mean that they want you to find those words like together somewhere.
Yeah, like as that you want that phrase as opposed to like 2 separate tokens. Okay, so now I'm looking at these and I'm actually seeing, now this is interesting. I do want to do express integration testing, right? So maybe I want to say Mocha Express integration test. Super test. So maybe now it'll be more helpful to remove super test. Getting started, no. Node.js's concurrency model makes API level integration. All right. Well, this one is looking interesting to me. Continuous integration. Okay, so we can further refine it by saying not continuous, but at this point I'm like getting the integration test running in Mocha. Okay, and apparently he doesn't mention super test, so we'll look at him. Integrate it with our mode app. I'm not loving that one. How to test your Express controllers. Let's have a look. All right, can try this one. What's that?
Oh, it was not mentioned that. Shouldn't be using it. I won't see this with that.
Okay, so this one looks like it's using a quit. And who wouldn't trust the code barbarian? Oh, a quit example repo as an example. So this one is using super agent. Is that different from super test? I don't know.
But it might be part of
I think that is quite possible. So let's how would we learn whether super agent and super test are related? Just super agent, super test?
Super test is a super agent driven library for testing Node.js HTTP servers.
Elegant API for Ajax in Node and browsers. I actually think super agent might be something different.
The first one said super test is super agent driven.
Yeah, but this is super dash agent. Okay, so we can look at this, but I also want to see, I just want to say node super agent module, right? Because we know that from this here, that super agent is an actual module, right? So Ajax will suck. Okay, so we can just go to super agent npm here and see what we get. Oh, this is just with the keyword super agent. Super test is one of them. Super agent driven. No, I think you're right. Now that I see it here without the dash, I'm. But I also sometimes I might just be very English, and I might just be like, does super test use super agent?
She's asked to use it
I didn't. But sometimes the reason I might be really English like this is because sometimes that question will come up on Stack Overflow, right? But yeah, I'm seeing super agent here, and I'm seeing it written exactly the same way here. So I'm guessing that super test is built on top of this super agent. I would, if I wanted to know more, I would go in here. Oh, well, that was easy. Okay, cool. So yes, so super agent is part of super test, but it is not exactly super test. Let's see what this one. Let's see whether this one has any super at all. Nope, no super. Okay. Instinct from vows. Okay, so they're switching from vows to Mocha, and they work at a place called Instinct. Syntax, async. You install Mocha. You translate from vows. You run the tests. You auto run the tests. You do npm tests. What's that?
They did have examples of it, just after their translations.
Okay, so like this here?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is what I was looking for.
Oh, okay. So, but this looks, yeah, this looks like it's a user object, and it has a create method. Thank you. Yeah, but no, that's good. That's good, Jedi. Not to completely just blow past the examples. I actually might. So I am not a patient like reader. So I often just like try and go straight to the part that I want. It bites me sometimes. Sometimes it makes me very efficient. So, okay, but we're using.
I was looking for examples of just integration testing, but everything's very specific back to like using specifically super testing and like specific other libraries. Like good and
Yeah, I think from my understanding you have to pick an instruction library.
yeah, with with chives or
It's
Yeah,
chai.
or chai is that.
yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out. Like, is there one that has like milk and chocolate, but not specifically super test as like something else?
Like it's chai HTTP and assertion.
Yeah, but chai HTTP.
As far as testing like routes and such.
Yeah, so this one, it looks like this one is using request. That's what they're using here, not super test. They're using request. But yes, but yeah, I mean, if we're just going off of our I've been chatted again. Oh, okay, just forgave me. So if we're just going off of like we're trying to find ways to do it without actually using super test, you know, so we found one. It looks like we can use request. It doesn't talk about that request. So at this point, what would you Google to try and find out more about request? So yeah, I probably would do Mocha requests, like Mocha or even Node request or NPM request. The reason is request here is actually not specifically attached to Express, right? Here I could request. Right now it's requesting a local route, but I could totally. I think I'm trying to see. To me, it doesn't. I don't see where request is actually defined in this code, right? So, so I could probably use like http://google.com, right? You know, so I think I'm more interested in request as it relates to Node as opposed to request as it relates to Express. So let's try request Node module. Sure. I also definitely look at the autocompletes when I'm doing it. Simplified look, and you get a swimmer for whatever reason. Oh, and then there's request promise, which what you've seen request promise. Oh, okay. So simple to use. Oh, I see. So they were using request without giving it a host. So they must have had some sort of either default host or it defaults to localhost if you don't give it a host. Okay, so it looks like you can use request. Yeah, so let's summarize sort of what we did there. So we tried a few different phrases until we got what we want. Again, like I'm impatient, so if I look at the first few and they don't look like what I want, I'll probably try a different phrase. And then or different search, whatever. And then we looked at a few things, and yeah, and then finding the right terms, like, you know, for doing this request in Node instead of request in Express, that's probably something that comes more with experience. But, you know, just making sure that you're very specific and detail oriented in what you are, in what you're looking for. And yeah, that one I think is probably more just an experience one, but just maybe really trying to filter out, is what I'm searching for really relevant to what I actually need? Yeah.
Can I ask a question about someone had said just putting in JavaScript? It's kind of too much of a broad term. It's term to use Node anytime you're looking at. It's going to differentiate like when they use Node versus JavaScript.
Yeah, so Node, yeah, I would definitely, if it was something that I was doing in Node, I would definitely use Node, right? If it was not Node, if it was browser JavaScript, I might even put MDN in there, or possibly just browser, right? But yeah, Node is good because it is its own interpreter of JavaScript, and it's going to be possibly somewhat different from browser JavaScript. Yeah. Other questions on Googling or anything else?
So I've always done like all of my Google searches as like asking Google a string of like human readable text instead of like super syntactical. Use this, but exclude these. Do you get like better results using the super syntactical?
I don't use plus and minus.
Okay.
So I can't speak for me personally. Jedi, would you say you get better results using the plus and minus?
I get results a lot faster. But if I don't do any of those things, then I'll end up getting a huge jumble of all the keywords, and normally I don't want half of them. I just want sites that relate to them.
So Jedi, like for example, like no plus something minus and that kind of
I would just start with like if it's like saving something in my note, I would just do like node save to start, and then if it gives me a whole bunch of things that I'm like, this is clearly not what I want, if they're on the same thing, then I'll try to take a keyword that all of those things that I don't want to have, and then do like minus that keyword, and then generally all those pieces will go. If I lose too much, then I'll refine it a bit. Just lots of like test. Just scroll down like a page, see if I'm getting for the most part what I want. If it seems way off, I'm just gonna ditch that search and try again.
Yeah, so Jedi was saying that he gets results much faster for the plus and minus, and especially if he starts with a really broad search like node save, and he's getting too much of something that is not applicable to what he wants. He can look at all of the ones that aren't applicable and see if they sort of share a word in common and can put a minus on those. Cool. Yeah, knowing how to Google, just super important. I have to say, one of the things I do definitely use the autocompletes, and I'm sorry that when I start typing down here, it like types for you up here and it's going to be small, but so, sometimes I'll just say like, yeah, let's say if I'm doing like mocha chai, and then I'm like, sometimes I'll even just look at that and I'm like, no, none of those are really what I wanted. I wanted mocha chai errors, and then no, I don't really want expect error or assertion error. I want test error, and so, then, but, like a lot of times people, like usually I am not the first person who's asking this question, and I try and take advantage of that autocomplete, to, yeah. And so now I'm like, oh, expect to throw, that looks interesting, and yeah.
If you just do Google's advanced search function and fill things out, it will dump it back into the search box, and you can see what everything's actually
Okay, yeah. So Jedi is suggesting if you do the advanced search, which we thought might be, let's just go back to the page. All right, let's do Google advanced search. Okay. All right, good. So you just go to google.com/advanced_search. And Jedi is saying, okay, I want these words. I want mocha and chai. I want this exact word or phrase, test error. It's interesting. So all of these words, and then I want any of these words. So either exception or I don't know, exception or now I'm just making stuff up. Target, none of these words, boba, and numbers ranging from 45 to 87. Okay. Yeah. And if we do that advanced search, then it, now it tells me, okay, so there's exception or, yeah, no results found. So that's shocking. So exception or target, it gives me this phrase in quotes, the minus with the boba, and the 45.87 for the range. Okay, interesting, it didn't give me a plus. Nice. And it didn't have boba in it, so, you know, we're all good. Well, it said it has these words, so I'm surprised it, you know, it,
Or did it make it crazy?
yeah, or like it just didn't, there's nowhere for you to give it something that associates with the plus, right? So that's a disadvantage of advanced search, but we have Jedi to tell us that you use plus if it needs to contain that particular word. Okay. Cool. Okay. Thanks guys. Have a good afternoon.